As the creator of Mara Jade,
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
I'm sorry, Zed.
No way.
You brought
No
it on
way.
You brought it on yourself.
I don't want you here.
George Lucas has just stunned Disney with a power move that no one saw coming. He is coming back to Star Wars. Yes, the mastermind behind the entire galaxy we love, the visionary behind Jedi, Sith, and the Force itself, might finally be stepping in to fix the franchise.
A lot of those ideas that were in there sort of got lost, but that's the way it is. If you give it up, you give it up.
After years of controversy, fan disappointment, and Disney's struggle to recapture the magic, could this be the moment that changes everything? Will Lucas bring Star Wars back to its former glory?
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are right. You know, I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
And
sell
you
them off.
sold them.
I sold them to the white slavers.
It all started when George Lucas, the mastermind behind Star Wars, voiced his frustration over how Disney had handled his beloved franchise after he sold it in 2012. While attending the Cannes Film Festival, he spoke candidly about feeling disconnected from the universe he had created, explaining that Star Wars was more than just movies. It was a deeply thought-out mythology that only he truly understood. The core ideas, particularly the Force and its philosophical aspects, seem to have been diluted in the new films. Although he acknowledged that he had willingly given up control, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had been lost in translation.
I was also stepping away a little bit and turning things over to Kathy Kennedy. And so what happened was Disney said, or Bob Iger said, gee, if you really want to sell your company, if you're thinking about selling it, because we were talking about retirement and what are you going to do after all this kind of stuff.
Then, in a moment that sent shockwaves through the Star Wars fan base, Roger Christian, a longtime collaborator and close friend of Lucas, casually mentioned that George might be involved in an upcoming live-action Star Wars project. It wasn't a formal announcement, nor was it some offhand speculation. His words carried a weight that made it seem like he had inside knowledge. He stated, "From what I hear, George will have something to do with it." And just like that, the internet exploded with theories. Roger Christian isn't just any industry veteran. He's someone who has been in Lucas's creative circle for decades. If anyone outside Lucas's immediate circle had credible information, it would be him. Roger Christian added even more fuel to the fire by mentioning that Lucas had been spending more time on set recently. That little detail suggested that even if he wasn't officially announced as part of a new project, he was certainly taking an active interest in what was happening.
You know, I made the decision to sell the company with Star Wars. I made that decision because I looked at the future, I looked at the fact that I was going to have a baby, I looked at the fact that I was married, and I looked at the fact that I wanted to build a museum, and I looked at the fact that I wanted to make experimental films.
Lucas himself has spoken about his discomfort with the direction Disney took. In previous interviews, he admitted that he had trouble staying away from his creations. Even during the original trilogy, when he handed over directing duties for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he found himself constantly guiding the directors, whispering suggestions, and ensuring that everything stayed true to his vision. He simply couldn't let go. And now, after a decade of watching others steer the ship, could he finally be stepping back in? If Lucas does return, even in an advisory role, it would be a game changer for Star Wars. The franchise has felt somewhat disjointed under Disney's leadership. While there have been successful projects like Rogue One and The Mandalorian, there have also been low moments, particularly the sequel trilogy, which left many fans disappointed. A major complaint has been the lack of a clear, cohesive vision. Lucas's involvement could bring back that sense of unity and purpose that made the original saga so powerful. After all, he's not just a filmmaker, he's the architect of an entire mythology. But this wasn't the first time Lucas had voiced his disappointment with how Disney handled Star Wars. Back in 2015, during an interview with Charlie Rose, he caused a stir when he referred to Disney as white slavers, in the way they treated his creation. While he later walked back that comment, the message was clear: he wasn't happy. He had spent decades building the Star Wars universe, carefully crafting its stories, characters, and mythos. To him, the saga wasn't just a film franchise. It was a deeply personal project, something he had poured his soul into. Watching it take a turn he never intended was difficult, to say the least. He had envisioned a specific future for Star Wars, one that he had meticulously outlined. But once Disney took control, those plans were set aside.
I noticed the last few movies that I'd made were costing the company a lot of money, and I didn't think that was fair to the people that worked there or the company.
His frustration wasn't just speculation or fan theories. Disney's own CEO, Bob Iger, confirmed it in his memoir. Iger admitted that Lucas had developed his own ideas for a sequel trilogy, and even provided detailed outlines for the story's direction. However, Disney ultimately decided to go in a different direction, a move that left Lucas feeling sidelined. Their early meetings about the future of Star Wars didn't go smoothly, and Iger himself acknowledged that things could have been handled better. It was clear that Lucas felt his input wasn't valued, which only deepened his sense of betrayal. Lucas didn't keep his disappointment a secret. Over the years, he spoke openly about how he no longer had any control over the franchise he built. In 2020, when asked by a student about the impact of societal changes on Star Wars, he admitted that he did not influence where the franchise was headed. The first 6 films, he explained, were a reflection of his philosophy and storytelling vision. But now, Star Wars was moving in a direction that no longer aligned with his original intentions. It was as if he had built a house, carefully designed every detail, only to have someone else come in and start redecorating in ways he never imagined. It wasn't just the movies that concerned him. The expanding Star Wars universe, particularly upcoming series like The Acolyte, seemed to confirm some of his worst fears. Actress Amandla Stenberg, who stars in the show, revealed that it would explore a time in the galaxy where the Force was viewed in a much more flexible way than in previous stories. This approach marked a significant departure from the more structured, philosophical view of the Force that Lucas had carefully built over the years. While some fans might welcome the shift, to Lucas, it likely felt like another step away from the foundation he had laid.
One of the issues was the first 3 movies had all kinds of issues. They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans. So I said, all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened.
Complicating matters further was the way Lucasfilm had positioned Dave Filoni as his spiritual successor. Filoni, the creative mind behind The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, had worked closely with Lucas in the past, and Disney often portrayed him as the one carrying on Lucas's legacy. Promotional materials for Ahsoka even described him as Lucas's apprentice with Jon Favreau. For Lucas, Star Wars was never just about space battles, lightsabers, or thrilling action sequences. At its core, it was a mythology, built on timeless themes of good versus evil, destiny, and personal growth. The Force wasn't simply a tool or a source of power. It was a deeply spiritual concept, a representation of balance and moral struggle. He saw Star Wars as a modern myth, one that carried lessons about philosophy, history, and human nature. That's why seeing it evolve into something more commercially driven, with less emphasis on the deeper themes he cherished, was so difficult for him. Despite all of this, Lucas has made it clear that he doesn't regret selling Star Wars to Disney. He has acknowledged in interviews that part of the reason for stepping away was to remove himself from the enormous pressure of overseeing the franchise. Running Star Wars was a massive responsibility, and at a certain point, he wanted to move on. He had spent decades immersed in that universe, and while it was a painful decision, selling it allowed him to focus on other aspects of his life. However, that doesn't mean he was content with how things turned out. What do you think about Lucas's take on how Disney has handled Star Wars? Do you believe he should have stayed involved? Or do you think the franchise needed to evolve beyond his vision? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates.